Coming in from roadways and inside offices. Anchorage, Alaska took a magnitude 7.0 earthquake about an hour and a half ago. Stay with Fox News for breaking coverage.
A Fox News alert on a major earthquake happening minutes ago in Alaska and a tsunami warning now in effect. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. We got this news about an hour and a half ago. It was a 7.0 magnitude quake rocking the city of Anchorage, just about 5 to 10 miles north of Anchorage. It opened huge cracks in the roads and caused people to run for shelter. Dan Springer is live in Seattle. He has been with us trying to explain all that he knows so far. Tell us what you have, Dan.
Yeah, Dana, we just got our first news out of the Anchorage Police Department. They've been scrambling, obviously, to get all the calls that they're taking in and then responding. And we got our first report from them, and it says we are handling multiple situations. We're working with our public safety partners to keep everyone safe. Here's the thing. They say there is major infrastructure damage across Anchorage. Many homes and buildings are damaged. Many roads and bridges are closed. Stay off the roads if you don't need to drive. Seek shelter. Check your surroundings. So they're obviously dealing with a lot of problems there right now. The schools have asked for the parents to pick up their children. We just got word from the Anchorage International Airport that the runways are open, so they are landing planes there, but they are not allowing people to drive up to and from the airport. So the ramps, the incoming and outgoing ramps to the airport have been closed. And I was texted a picture from a colleague, a person who works for Senator Murkowski, who sent it from me, who was actually seeing a tweet about this. Major road damage on Minnesota Drive, which is right there next to the International Airport. International Boulevard, which runs to the airport, is damaged as well. So you have severe damage to a lot of the roads. I did talk to some people in hotels there. One in a Marriott said that it shook pretty well, in fact, for about a minute, but that there was not significant damage to that hotel. But there are reports of people diving under desks and trying to just, get away from falling debris. But this is a 7.0 earthquake, 19 miles now, centered just about 7 miles north of Anchorage, just across the Cook Inlet in a place called Point McKenzie, which is not very populated, but how the city of Anchorage, as you know, is almost the entire population of the state of Alaska, with about 280,000 people. So virtually everybody in that area is going to feel it. We had an initial a tsunami warning that did not get extended all the way down to the Seattle area and beyond. The tsunami warning is located for the Cook Inlet, and it actually goes down to other parts of Alaska, but is not extended all the way down the coast. That's because of the depth of this earthquake.
Could I pause you there, Dan, and stand by? We want to go live to our affiliate, KTVA, in Anchorage. The building suffered a lot of damage. Let's listen in.
Debris.
And this light fixture is just kind of hanging on by a thread, it looks like.
I definitely
like this whole idea of, like, at least Helen over there. Yeah, I mean,
I'd like to show where I was when this happened, just because this is a pretty impressive example of what you're looking at, about why it's important to get under shelter.
Oh my!
So this is the room I was in when this happened. I don't know how well you guys can see, but this is our tape room. All these tapes.
Back to early Iditarod. I mean, like the first Iditarod is in here. We got some really cool classic footage.
Yeah, and
KTVA archives here.
I was sitting over there at that computer, and luckily got out of the building before a lot of this happened, but this is going to be a mess to clean up, obviously. But imagine if you were trying to hide or take shelter against the wall with the tapes. This is why you don't do that, because this can fall on you, it can hurt you. A lot of this other stuff could have fallen and got you, or any of us. Don't stay under a doorway. Yeah. Get under something sturdy.
What's back here?
Looks like we got our.
This used to be the graphics department. Oh man, entire tables flipped over back here and looked, or maybe this is just mess to begin with.
It is not. This is worse.
And then
let's go downstairs.
A lot of people were asking if anyone was okay, if everybody here was okay, and I believe everybody got out of the building okay. It was 8:30, so we didn't get our big rush of people coming into work quite yet. In fact, some folks that were usually here about this time weren't in yet, which was kind of a surprise to me. Be careful there, Doug. And we should show off Augie Hebert, the pioneer of Alaska television. The studio is named after him, and Man,
We
I
got
know.
some more damage. This is kind of what happens in earthquake damage. What happens is the whole building shakes, and the foundation, especially around wall seams, the sort of just rips. Right here you can see these studs where we had the studs come in. They got shook loose.
Yeah, look at that.
All right, so we lost that picture there, but we have Dan Springer still available with us, and also he's because Dan's going to stand by. Ben English is in Alaska. He felt the earthquake. He joins me now by phone. Dan, if you'll stand by, we're going to bring in Ben English, who was there and witnessed it firsthand. Ben, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me a little bit about what you experienced.
Well, I was on the 10th floor of my office building, and so the shaking was pretty extreme. It's exacerbated a little bit when you're high up in a building. There's pretty significant damage in the building, and I was able to make it home. I live close to the building, but there's pretty much major roadblocks and everybody trying to get out of Anchorage back home, and quite a bit of infrastructure damage.
How long did it last?
Well, I've been through a lot. I've been here about 20 years, and, you know, this one definitely was a lot longer, and something that intense, you know, time kind of stands still a little bit, so it's hard to tell exactly. If I had to guess, I'd say between 1 and 2 minutes.
And I'm assuming because you live there, you've been through this before, and you'd had drills in your building, so you knew what to do?
Yeah, it's kind of a panic situation. We have more fire drills rather than earthquake drills. I'm lucky that the building that I work in is designed pretty well for earthquakes, so damage was minimal. I think the major damage around town is probably going to be mostly infrastructure, the bridges and roads and things like that.
Yeah, just you know, for those who hadn't had the opportunity to go to the beautiful spot of Anchorage, Alaska, and its surroundings, tell us a little bit about the importance of the roads there. It's not like there are a lot of other options. It's not that highly populated. Tell me more about the damage.
No, well, yeah, there's basically one highway heading north and one highway heading south to get out of the city, and a lot of commuters live in those places, and if those roads are shut down, they have no other options to get home unless you took a helicopter or a boat. So I would imagine there's going to be people, if the roads are closed down, somewhat stranded in Anchorage, not able to get to their homes.
How did you said you got home pretty easily. How was that? Did you walk?
I'm about 5 minutes from work, so I'm pretty lucky. I live over close to the airport, and my office is in Midtown. So I'm home now just assessing damage at the house, and we have, a lot of pictures fell and glasses came out of the cupboards and smashed on the floor, and there's cracks in the walls and things like that, but nothing too extreme. I think I live in a pretty good soil area, but I think that folks who are in more of the bedrock areas probably shook harder and may have more damage than I do. I think I probably fared pretty lucky. One gentleman in my office moved here in 1968, right after the big 64 earthquake, and he said it's by far the strongest one he's felt in the last 50 years.
When was the last one you remember?
We have them, every year. We have them all the time, little ones. The biggest one I remember since I've been here about 20 years was 2002. I believe it was a 7.6 up near Denali, so it was a couple hundred miles away. It did damage, but this was a much more severe in Anchorage, even though it was less of a magnitude because of the proximity. It was so close to Anchorage, and I think the depth was fairly shallow.
For the epicenter, tell me about that area. Is it, I'm assuming, not highly populated, but do people live up there?
Some do. I think it was at Point McKenzie, which is basically right across Cook Inlet from the city of Anchorage. And there's some infrastructure out there, railroads, some industrial stuff, but I think, the outskirts of Wasilla and Palmer probably felt it pretty strong as well. But right where the epicenter is, not too much built up, but again, it's not far from Anchorage, so that's probably the key point.
And what do you know about being prepared for aftershocks?
Well, I know that they have been happening with regularity. Immediately, I think we had a 5.3 or something just 5 minutes after the initial one. So we are to expect aftershocks. I think that's common. I did feel 3 or 4 of them immediately afterwards, and they're saying that we can expect them for the next day or so to be tapering off slowly.
All right, Ben English, we appreciate your coming on with us to tell us about your account. And I will now go to, I think, do we have Dan Springer still? Dan?
Yeah, Dana, I was just listening to your guest there, and one of the things that struck me is that, one thing that Alaska has going for it is that it became a state so recently. 1959 is when Alaska became a state. A lot of the high-rises there were built for government offices and also by the oil companies after the Alaska oil pipeline was built in the 60s, and so they're relatively new, they're relatively strong. And I talked to somebody at the Marriott, which is right downtown, not very far from the epicenter, and it shook. It was a big jolt, and it went on for about a minute, but she said she only had a nutcracker fall off the shelf. So obviously a lot of people had more than that, but the point here is that these are post-earthquake, 1964 quake, buildings that were built, and so I think the high rises, we're not going to see major damage to them. You're going to have damage to homes. In fact, we got a report from the Anchorage Police Department, which is getting phone calls from virtually everybody in the city right now, that there has been major structural damage, lots of homes, lots of roads. We have a shot that I saw from a colleague that I work with, not a colleague, but a person who works for Senator Murkowski, who sent a picture that had been tweeted out of Minnesota Drive, which is a main north-south road that goes through downtown and then out of town.
Yeah, this is the big. Dan, we're able to show the picture here, and you can see that road is, that's going to take a lot of cleaning up to do.
That is that's a major thoroughfare that connects Anchorage to its midtown areas and then areas further south. It goes all the way, past Anchorage and out. So, and that's also what we heard from the folks at Ted Stevens International, that is right by the airport. So International Boulevard and Minnesota Drive kind of intersect there right next to Ted Stevens International Airport. And again, the reporting is that the runways are open, but the roadways getting to the airport and leaving the airport are closed. So they are landing flights, but people can't leave the airport once they get there. Dana?
All right, Dan Springer, if you'll stand by. Mike Angove is with NOAA. He's the tsunami programming manager. And Mike, if you could just tell us how you make the decision about a tsunami warning. This triggered it immediately after the 7.0 earthquake hit just a few miles north of Anchorage, Alaska.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. It was a very large earthquake, but it's not in an area that we typically have to really worry about for tsunami. We typically are looking out into the subduction zone that would be maybe 100 kilometers or two offshore. But this occurred inland in the Cook Inlet. But because of the size, 7.0, that's a big earthquake. That creates a lot of shaking within the inland waterways. And the big concern for us is, does that shaking result in any landslides that might be falling into those waterways that can then create their own little tsunamis? And there has been a history of that happening in Alaska. So that was our big concern with this. I am happy to report that we have just canceled that warning. Our center in Palmer has been looking very closely at all of the water level gauges throughout the Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula, and has determined that none of that activity, at least large, happened, and so we just canceled the warning. But that's why we put it up and why we needed that time to do all of that water level evaluation.
And how do you do that? How technically does that work?
So the center in Palmer they're looking at just doing a quick earthquake analysis, and we have seismic sensors all over the state of Alaska, so they were able to get that pretty quick. And if the magnitude is large enough, then we have a pre-planned response that says, okay, we have this risk of local tsunami. And so that all sort of happens in a pre-planned way. And then we get into the real live time of looking at all of the coastal water level gauges. Some of them are tide gauges, fishing stations, or whatever the case is, anything that tells us is water level moving. And so that's really what the focus of that warning center becomes once the initial alert goes up, is to closely monitor the water level gauges. All
right, so just to reiterate, you have canceled the tsunami warning, so that everybody that was asked to move to higher ground can now return to their desks or their homes, wherever they were going.
That is correct.
All right, Mike Angove, we appreciate you coming on. We'll stay in touch with you as anything